Happy Wednesday, Penn State fans. It's the middle of USC week. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated. BWI Live coming to you live on October 9. T. Frank, we are. I've heard from James Franklin once this week. We will hear from him again later tonight as Penn State actually holds its final practice, or at least one of its final practices, in State College before heading west on Thursday to USC. Lincoln Riley met with reporters on Tuesday night in Los Angeles. Did not have much to say about Penn State. They were still rehashing a lot of the Minnesota stuff and talking some injury information. He'll speak again with the media on Thursday. How we doing this morning, T. Frank? Middle of USC week. It's somehow, I don't know how long it's going to take to not be weird to say that Penn State is getting ready to go on the road to USC for a Big Ten game. Yeah. But that's where we are in 2024.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've always started with an NFL mindset because that's what I love. That's what I started with when it comes to football first. So traveling to the West Coast, playing teams from Los Angeles, all of that is relatively normal, but it is weird to apply all of that logic to college. For me, it just makes it simpler. I don't have to have two sets of rules in my brain anymore. And that really is where we are, right? Like this is a professional minor league for the NFL, but it's also just professional football with semi-professional football players. So I'm not trying to start an argument in the chat. I don't know why I went like scorched earth 1 minute and 45 seconds into the show, but yeah, like that's what I think about this. Of like, it's just like, think of it like they're going to play the Chargers, and it's kind of you get it. It's just that's the mindset I have, and you're literally wearing an Eagles sweatshirt, so I know you have that in the back of your mind too.
No doubt about it. Yes. Morning, Kevin. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on a Wednesday morning. T. Frank, one thing I'll note real quick, as some of you maybe can tell if you're watching YouTube, I have a new mic. So if you notice any low audio or anything like that, please let us know in the chat so we can troubleshoot that live. So let's get into it, T. Frank. Penn State hitting the practice field on Wednesday night. The Nittany Lions, of course, had Monday off. They were on the field Sunday doing corrections from the 27-11 win over UCLA. So yesterday was their true first practice of USC week. Today is the second. Certainly there's plenty of things to talk about in terms of what we will be watching for. But I assume, like most every other week, we will start on the injury front and see who's there right. and who's not later today in State College.
Yeah, and now that I know that there are a couple number changes, I was wondering why in the world was Tyler Johnson wearing 11 when there was no 11 for UCLA, and turns out he just changed his number. So that's helpful when we're trying to go through the team's D squad and who's moving around the roster from that perspective, because health does play into that. And also, for a position like receiver, that is what everyone wants to know is is the bottom going to rise up? Is somebody going to be a part of the conversation? It feels like the top four are locked in this year, and that's that. But at the same time, certain positions you want to know how a guy is progressing and get some of those indicators throughout the week. So that's always the other thing. But you're right. Unfortunately, I'm that guy. I literally run to the offensive line because that's where the most interesting thing is when we start. So I go to the offensive line and see who's there. And for the first month of the season, super easy. Everyone was exactly where you expected them to be, left to right for the two deep. Now, Anthony Donkoh, is JB Nelson moving around? How are all of those things working from a health perspective? Have they retooled or reshuffled anything? And is Anthony Donkoh even there? So those are the things we're going to be looking for, number one, at practice tonight.
No question, T. Frank. For those, of course, I don't think anybody missed it. But just in case you did, Anthony Donkoh hurt early in the UCLA game, was really favoring his left shoulder. Yeah. What the situation is there. It did not come up Monday at James Franklin's news conference. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that's likely because of the fact that James Franklin 2 Mondays ago made pretty clear that he's probably not going to have any injury information on Mondays, right? So don't ask. But the question will come up tonight. If he is not at practice, you'll be out there. The guys will be too, and we'll have full information at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Brady, happy birthday, buddy. Thank you for spending some time with us on your special day. I hope you enjoy it and get to do something fun. In terms of other things, so Anthony Donkoh, JB Nelson, of course, are the two, the headliners, right? I mean, if we were going to write an early story to get ready for practice, those two would be the headliners. But what else do you want to see as Penn State gets ready to hit the road to USC?
So it's just, what's the plan this week? We get to see really like a very limited sample size of practice that mostly involves positional drills. But the nature of, as you mentioned, like they have two practices. They have a walkthrough on Thursday, which I think they're going to either do or not do late when they get to Los Angeles. but this is the practice. So they've got to do stuff while we're there. So we get to see at least portion of what the plan is. I can't talk about it, but I do notice things week to week about, okay, what are they doing? How are they processing these things? And kind of the problem is coming into this show and coming into today, a little bit behind the curtain, like we have to have our predictions in for the game. And Thursday is typically the day where I have the opportunity to really dig into the film and know what the other team is and isn't. Luckily, there was a bye week early in the season, so I got some preview of USC done. I did some in a rush job this morning, so I'm just going to be looking for, okay, do I know what I saw, and do they have the same opinion of that? So to me, from the offensive perspective specifically, I'm looking at those things, and that is something that we'll find out together on Saturday.
No question about it, T. Frank. Of course, we'll be looking to see if Nick Singleton is on the practice field as well. From all indications, both Blue White Illustrated reporting and what James Franklin said on Monday, I think it would be almost shocking if he was not back on the practice field and available for Penn State against USC. So probably should have mentioned that off the jump, but that is another thing we'll be keeping an eye on as well as Penn State, as we said, gets ready to go to USC. Line's moving. It's up to 5.5. I don't know how much of that is reflecting just the fact that Penn State beat UCLA while USC was upset at Minnesota, or if the betting public at this stage thinks that the line should be closer to a touchdown, which it was when the Games of the Year line first came out. So we'll get into more of that, but of course we're going to hear from James Franklin later today too. T. Frank, what's the first thing you want to hear from him when he talks with reporters outside of the injury stuff? Because I think it's too easy. It's too easy. Yeah. So once we get anything about Anthony Donkoh, Nick Singleton, J.B. Nelson, Caden Saunders' foot out of the way, where do you want to go next? What's most important to you for Penn State this week?
I guess it's the other side of that in terms of how confident are they that they can operate what they want to do with the players involved if those starters don't make the trip or aren't, available. And that is, again, these are things that he's not going to talk about or things that we're not going to know. This is always the problem is like, I feel like when it comes to these particular situations, asking the real questions is unproductive because he would never give the answer of like, yeah, we have to change our game plan because Nolan Rucci's playing right tackle. So the questions and answers, I guess it's looking at a deeper level of some of the things we're talking about later, and I'm trying hard not to spoil some of the things that we're going to be discussing later in the show. But like, how does the defensive structure work this week? Do we finally get to see Dejon Lane? How confident are they to play him in a Big Ten game? Is he game ready? I guess that's, to me, now that I'm talking myself into the question, that would be the thing is like, is Dejon Lane ready? I already asked him about Zacharia Wheatley earlier this week, so I can't ask him again about Zacharia Wheatley. But to me, it's all about that. It's about the defensive game plan. This particular game is the situation where you would want your three safeties out there because this is a spread offense that has an attacking style threat from the slot and also can run the ball. This is a perfect game for three safeties. Can they get there? Have they done enough work since the injury to KJ Winston for that to be the reality?
Right, and I think we'll have to wait and see on that. Certainly no hand tipping will take place this evening inside of Haluba Hall. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And then the other thing I'm interested to hear, and you kind of foreshadowed this a little bit earlier, but what exactly is the Penn State plan for going to Los Angeles? So I'm going to ramble a little bit. You can start thinking about that question that just popped in. We'll get to that in just a second. But, what is the plan? Are they going to do their walkthrough before they leave, or are they going to leave, or are they going to do it when they get out there? My assumption is that they'll probably do it before they leave. My best guess is that they're going to get to the West Coast probably around, mid-evening, 7-ish, something like that would be my guess. So do they want to rush over to a practice field and do that as soon as they land, or do they want to get settled, get situated, have some meetings, and go to bed? So time will tell on that, but I do expect him to give some more intel in terms of what they're going to do exactly, before they leave, once they get there, so on and so forth. Jalen Reed was asked about that on Tuesday during a news conference and said that, he wasn't quite sure yet what the plan was, but he was confident that they would have a good plan. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Super chat. Should we just roll right to that?
Yeah, well, actually, go to Mac the Mustard Man, and his comment about West Virginia. Just because, like, that was my facial expression. So people watching on the YouTube channel, I don't have a poker face, and Mac the Mustard Man says West Virginia is arguably a better team, factually better losses, and a far less hostile environment. I don't believe that to be true. USC has more talent, and wins and losses, all of those things are fair. West Virginia is not a bad team. Everyone wants to discard the previous team like a used paper towel once you've beaten them. I agree they're not a bad team, but USC is a better football team. They're just that's I don't know. I feel like we're trying to make arguments here and fit the facts to what we want to believe. But yeah, get back up to 2 kids, PSU, 1 wife, and we'll get into that one.
Yeah, so just just for the sake of argument and whether or not you agree with, disagree with the SP Plus rankings, that has on a neutral field, USC is a 4-point favorite. So take that for what it's worth. That would be over West Virginia, of course, if those two teams were going to play. So at any rate, thank you for the donation. 2 kids, 1 wife, all PSU. You can always super chat just like this if you want to get your question front and center. We have a rundown. You are always welcome to rip it up and tell us what you want to hear us talk about. So here's the question. Could you please detail for those who don't watch the film, specifically the defensive line, that Deni Dennis-Sutton has been pretty good this year? To many on Blue White Illustrated are down on him because of his lack of sack production. I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I don't know if you need any more of a lead-in, so just
sacks are overrated. Yeah. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but sacks generally are overrated if you are not counting the full picture. Because, I mean, you might have, let's say you have a great season, and you get 10 sacks, and you rush the passer 250 times. That is an infinitesimal amount of the number of pass rushes. So if you only get 10 sacks on a season, your production from a counting perspective, from a box score perspective, is excellent. But if you're absent on the rest of those 250 rushes, you are not a good pass rusher holistically. The fact, what's the difference between Deni Dennis-Sutton hitting the UCLA quarterback twice in the arm and the ball going up in the air, as opposed to he gets there 0.05 seconds or 0.005 seconds earlier and it's a sack? Those are functionally the same play. He killed that play. He has been very good in these situations. Has he been Chop Robinson? Is he a top 5 pick in the NFL draft? I think he believes he is. But I would say from a perspective of his overall talent and his abilities, he is not going to be that in the long run. But is he? Rhetorical question after rhetorical question. I'm just going to say it. He's an NFL defensive end who plays a specific style. He's going to be he's very good against the run. He has been active, and the nature of Penn State's defense, kind of getting into something we're going to talk about later and what I talked about in the film room, is if you go and you look at what UCLA did and you don't like how it feels, they dink and dunk down the field. The quarterback for UCLA, Justin Martin, averaged 2.5 yards per pass attempt because they were terrified of Abdul Carter and Deni Dennis-Sutton. That is a material effect on the game plan. UCLA agreed pregame with their game plan that we're not going to challenge this defense. We opt out of explosive plays. Right. Hopefully we get one here or there with a busted coverage with Tammy Robinson in coverage against a running back or a catch and run in some situation. But we're not going to threaten the ball down the field because we don't believe our tackles or our offensive line can hold up against Zane Durant, Deni Dennis-Sutton, and Abdul Carter. And so whether it's the actual pressure stats, quarterback hits, hurries, and sacks, or if it's the more holistic effect that the defensive line is having on the game, absolutely, those are things that are in the favor of Deni Dennis-Sutton being a very good football player. If you want to say 5-star, number 1 D end, hasn't been a top 5 pick, okay, but like we told you that. We told you that coming into college. That's why I do those film breakdowns. It's not just to say like, here's a 4-star and he's really good. This is the nature of his skill set. This is what you can expect from him. And here are the areas, despite his ability, like his star ranking, here is his growth projection. And so that's the context of the whole thing, if you want to dive into Deni Dennis-Sutton and all of those things.
Another super chat here. Thank you so much. Larry IZP0, who writes, PFF had PSU at number 2 in pressure rate and number 1, I think, in terms of how fast they get home. People need to understand teams are playing us differently with getting the ball out in 2 seconds on purpose and then relax in all caps. Yeah, I think that's what you're getting at too, T. Frank. Larry, thank you. And thanks you, for everyone listening and donating to the channel and things like that. And yeah, for sure. The hard thing here is that I think USC is going to do the same thing. Like Lincoln Riley is going to do the same thing to Penn State this week. So get mentally prepared for it now, Penn State fans. If you're on the Blue White Illustrated message board and you're chatting with us live during the game, which subscribers do, we have a special offer if you're not one, but you want to be one. It's a flash sale, 50% off an annual membership. It's billed annually. It's, I think, $4.99 a month, or if not, it's even lower. So 50% off an annual membership at bluewhiteillustrated.com, promo code WEARE. It is not case sensitive, so you can do it We Are in all caps. You can do it We Are in all lowercase. You can do it a WEARE and put the W and the A up. That's fine too. Promo code WEARE is 50% off to join Blue White Illustrated with an annual membership today.
You can even do sarcasm font with every other being capitalized.
That's fine. You can do that too. That's right. But, for those who are listening to the show and are subscribers of Blue White Illustrated, but for those who would like to be, we have an in-game thread. It's crazy. We have fun with it, but it is a 3-hour roller coaster ride. No matter what is going on in the game, win, lose, draw, or otherwise. But one of the things that I bring that up because I can see it now. Game starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. By like 4:15, we will have a high number of comments, I think, about where's the pass rush. The pass rush is not getting home, so on and so forth. And USC is going to make it that way. So it's incumbent on, we're going to get into some of our key players and X factors, but it's incumbent on some other guys to be able to pick up the pieces.
I just want to throw in a promo for what Greg and what Nate and what Fitz do when they're at the game. Is they give you the pre-game report on who's dressed, what's the injury report, what's the availability report, who's going through the line first, who's the announced starting lineup. So they give you the in-stadium experience as best they can so that going into the game, okay, this is what to expect. And you can't, as somebody who is not there, you can't get it anywhere else. I rush home from the tailgate show so I can go read the pregame thread to know what they're seeing, because otherwise you're listening to the pregame show, which is, I like pregame shows, but they're not giving you those hard details that these guys are that actually affect the game between the lines. So they're awesome. And that's a reason you should subscribe right now. The promo code WEARE.
Speaking of subscribers, Stephen Light is one, and he has a super chat. Thank you as well, Stephen, for the donation to the channel. Question: what accounts for consistently slow offensive starts for Penn State? We can still beat USC without a fast start, but Ohio State is another matter. T. Frank, before I let you get into the X's and O's, I was thinking about this morning, Stephen, when I was doing my prediction for this game, and I can honestly make a case for this game to play out any number of ways, and I'll tell you why a little bit later in the show. But I don't know if Penn State can necessarily survive a slow start in this game, and it's mainly because the defense has been better, as we all know, in the second half than the first half. They make incredible halftime adjustments, but if you have a slow start on offense combined with a slow start on defense, this USC team has enough weapons. I know it was not all that impressive at Minnesota. I get it, but I think some fans have almost gotten to the point of this conversation where USC is almost like an afterthought. But if they won that game, and this was a top 10 matchup, I feel like they'd be talked about a lot differently. And they're still the same team no matter what number is beside them. Yes, they have some turnover issues. No, they don't have a pass rush. Yes, Penn State's better at both line of scrimmages, in the trenches on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. But I don't know if Penn State can afford a slow start. But in your mind, T. Frank, when you watch the film, what is going into these slow starts on the Penn State offense that Drew Aller and others have promised to fix that has been, over the last 3 weeks at least, it has not been the case?
So part of it is a combination of a slow start on defense as well, where I'm trying to remember the other games, because obviously last week you go third down and you don't convert and you go 3 and out. So that's part of it, is you don't get a chunk play on first or second down. You're third and manageable, and then you don't manage the third down. I've detailed Penn State's plan on third down and how they've been trying to stay on the field and be more methodical over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. So when you just miss on those, you therefore are off the field on what is a reasonable play, is your conversion play, essentially. And then the defense has allowed 8-play drives. I was trying to remember the West Virginia game and how that played out. They fumble on their first drive after they were off to a hot start. Then they fumbled. Then they go 3 and out. But in between then, West Virginia had a 7-minute and 40-second drive that spanned 64 yards and ended with no points. So then Penn State immediately goes back, 4 plays, a touchdown, but that was in the second quarter. So the first quarter,
right.
The way college football's clock works now and the way college football works with an NFL clock is if you are playing the right type of team in the right type of way, it drains the battery on the game clock. And that's the reality. It's something that Nate and I were talking about earlier this week is Penn State's style of gameplay and the way other teams are playing them, plus their offensive methodical drive, like Andy Kolnicki's offense huddles, and they're not a fast tempo team. They're just not getting enough drives in games, especially when you allow the other team to convert. So it is a holistic problem. The defense needs to start faster as well. But overall, I don't think that they're so far behind. Which game was it where they marched down the field and scored a touchdown in the first drive? I want to say it wasn't UCLA the game before, Greg?
It might have been Kent State, yes.
Penn State, yeah. And then, there's a whole other thing about how Penn State's playing games like Kent State and Bowling Green and UCLA that I think plays into the conversation about this week in particular. So I think it's a little bit of bad luck at times and a little bit of you have one first drive and you're getting 2 drives a quarter. So if something goes wrong and, short circuits that opening drive, you get what you get. And I don't think it's been terrible. It has not been as bad as it was before because they do get it in gear much more quickly than they did last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, Illinois was actually the game Penn State scored on this opening drive. So Illinois jumped out with an 11-play, 75-yard drive that took 5:24. Penn State answered it, 8 plays, 75 yards in 4 minutes. And then both teams proceeded to punt, miss field goal. Yeah. Which was just glorious to watch. Anyway, that's not the point here. But yeah, I think there's slow starts definitely. And, it's interesting because slow starts, I think you can define them 2 ways. One is your first drive is not very good, and one is your first quarter is not very good. So did Penn State start slow against Illinois? I think that's what's been said and what's been written. They did score on their first drive and then did nothing afterwards. So it can be a little bit of both. There's no question about it. Okay, well, we've already been doing it, T. Frank. So we might as well officially hit the Penn State USC preview graphic and get into that conversation. And we'll just act like we have not been doing that for the last 10 minutes anyway. Of course, like we said, Penn State USC set for 3:30 Saturday on CBS, 12:30 p.m. local start time in Los Angeles. USC leads the all-time series, not by a wide margin, but they have won the last 3 games against Penn State. And, of course, as we all know, this will be the first time the 2 teams meet as Big Ten opponents. So let's just kick off with this, T. Frank. Key player to the game. I went with key players just because there was an added S there. You have a key player. But this one is what you made the title card of this edition of the BWI Live Show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Wednesday, October 9th. Why is Jalen Reed, in your mind, the key player? You've talked about it some.
Yeah.
But the follow-up question to that is, who are the key player or players that will allow him to get into that role more often than not for Penn State?
So Jalen Reed playing the Lion in this game is the perfect matchup to make this, in my opinion, maybe even not a contest, because he provides you the thing you need in this situation to do what everyone else has done to USC. So I break it down just a little bit. They're tackling from the slot without Jalen Reed there, and combined with their coverage from the slot has been the issue for this defense, which we all said was going to happen after KJ Winston went down with an injury in the first half against Bowling Green, which again, in the chat, everyone's bringing up the Bowling Green game. They had to play guys in new positions in the middle of the drive with bad communication from the sideline. So context here is important. Since then, they have been fairly good at these things. Jalen Reed playing the Lion is really important because he can tackle and he can fill against the run, and he also can play zone coverages, rally, and tackle in space. Because there is, as clear as I've seen, in the information and in the preview of a team of how to defeat them. I think Penn State fans focus on what is the blueprint to beat Penn State without understanding what's the blueprint to beat your opponent. When you play man coverage against USC, or even just cover 1, cover 3, like a single high safety, so far this season, Miller Moss has thrown for like 600, almost 700 yards in those 2 games, and they've won those games. But when you play zone and you force them to dink and dunk down the field, and you rally players to the slot to take away Zacharia Branch, and I know they've got other good players, but he is the real threat, right? To break a tackle. He's hyper electric and elusive. He's fast. You can't play him in man coverage for the most part. You have to be very selective about it. But if you play zone and you force Miller Moss to dink and dunk down the field, eventually that offensive line is going to betray them. And so Penn State needs to play zone with a good tackler out there. And so far, their slot corners have been, they've been okay. If they can get Jalen Reed to play the line, which means Zakee Wheatley has to play the boundary safety and Dejon Lane has to play the field safety, that's the key for this to be Penn State plays to the level I think that you saw Michigan play. I think they can duplicate that blueprint, which goes back to the game last week, Greg. UCLA, the first half, you didn't like the fact that they were dinking, and not you specifically, but fans don't like the fact that they were playing zone and teams were dinking and dunking down the field. They hadn't done that all year. And it was this question in the mailbag yesterday. Tom Allen's zone preferences. How do you avoid Miller Moss picking them apart? Do they mix up coverage, blitz more, or other? And I read this from Zloty, and I thought to myself, they haven't been playing zone all year. What are we talking about with Tom Allen's preference for zone? And it really was, Greg, just last week, because last week was practice for this week. They knew they could beat UCLA, in my opinion. This is my opinion here. They did this against Kent State before Illinois. They laid out the blueprint. They practiced what they were going to do, and then they executed it the next week on offense. This week, I think that's going to be the plan for defenses. They needed some reps playing zone, and that was the plan. So if USC drives down the field for 8 plays and doesn't get points, that's a win for the Penn State defense.
It is, absolutely. Let's get to a couple things from the chat quick, T. Frank. You just answered the zone question, so that's good. Thank you for making the live show. Thank you all for making the live show here on Wednesday. There was one more I wanted to get to, actually 2 more. This is the real Zeal. And I saw your comment about living in Florida, too. I hope everything goes well for you, your family, friends, and anyone listening in Florida. Stay safe with that hurricane getting ready to roll through. Does Penn State have the corners to play man against these receivers? And I think we're just talking about zone with the secondary and what they did last week. So if Penn State does decide to man up against this USC team, that's an interesting one. And obviously Branch is the focus, but he's not the only receiver Penn State has. Do you think do you think they can do that, or is it going to be a lot of zone? And then if they are playing a lot of zone, do you worry they play too soft a zone and give up a lot of easy access throws?
So I think the problem is, yes, I think they do have the corners. So let's just talk about physical ability. Zion Tracy's an excellent athlete. I think he has the athleticism to stay with Zacharia Branch. I think Cam Miller has the athleticism to stay with Zacharia Branch on 65% of the plays, but what happens on the other 35% of those plays? And furthermore, do they have the positional skill? Are they high-level football players to the point they can do that? It takes 1 rep. I was watching some of the film against Michigan, and they had that whole offense bottled up. It was 3rd and 11. They blitzed and played man coverage, and Branch was running a crossing route, and it was just by the length of a football that Branch caught the ball and then ran for like 55 yards in a catch-and-run situation. So it is the margin for error in those coverages is very small. Penn State's outside corners are good enough. Full stop. They can win that way. That's why the slot has been what I've been thinking about since the beginning of the season, honestly, in this particular matchup, and the way that Lincoln Riley uses his offense and the run threat they present to teams that try to run, either too high defenses or that try to play a light box. They can still get yardage that way. So you need to have some sort of hybrid athlete to put there. So I think there's an opportunity. Penn State can still selectively play man coverage, but this is my biggest concern, is that maybe I'm reading the tea leaves wrong and they plan to play press man coverage in this game. And I think that's a big gamble. I think that would be the thing I would say levels the playing field for USC to the point where they can get some explosive plays and stay in the game.
No question, T. Frank. And I think that's the decision facing Tom Allen and his defensive staff. And as he calls the game from the press box, he's going to have to be, of course, willing to adapt from whatever plan he starts with. Because USC is certainly Lincoln Riley is a very, very smart offensive mind, and he will change things on the fly. He will show Penn State looks they were not expecting. More importantly, though, he wants to pass. I mean, he wants to throw again. So secondary certainly going to be very much a part of the conversation this weekend. My key players, I went over to the offensive side of the ball. It's the running backs. No surprise there. Nick Singleton coming back to the Penn State lineup is what we expect. We'll have to wait and confirm that later this week and, of course, on Saturday in Los Angeles. But I think if Penn State's going to win this game, it needs those two to be at their best. We've seen Penn State's offense be at its best when Nick is rolling and then Katron comes in and just eats guys up. And for Penn State to win this game, I'm not saying they need to control the clock, so to speak. They can be explosive and they can make quick scoring strikes and things like that. But when you go on the road like this, especially late in the game, if you can get a lead, you need to keep getting first downs, even if it's on third down. You obviously would be hoping for third and manageable, and then let those guys run over some people to get first downs if that's what it takes. So to me, those two are really in the spotlight. You could pick any number of guys, of course, but I just think with Nick coming back, we saw that the Penn State rushing offense was not as dynamic as it has been without Nick Singleton against UCLA. Assuming he's back against USC, it changes the way Penn State can and will attack opponents, including USC. And I expect even without Anthony Donkoh, if he does not end up playing, Penn State to have an edge up front, especially in the run game.
Yeah, and so my X factor is Nolan Rucci for the same exact reason, because Anthony Donkoh provides you. I'd say Penn State's run game this year has been a cheat code where if you can just get 7 yards on a run from Nick Singleton, how do you not just spam that if you're the offensive coordinator? And nothing against Katron Allen, because he has been excellent this year after he usually starts a little slow. It seems like he has to kind of knock the rest of the offseason off and then he gets going. He's gotten going recently, but without that explosive element, without that speed element, they don't have the balance of explosiveness across the field where they need that from the run game. And Nick Singleton provides that to you. But if you're not going to have that, and they will this week, presumably, but how healthy is Nick Singleton? Is he ready to be that guy with whatever injury he's dealing with? And if you want more on what injury that is, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, Nate Bauer has done a great job of detailing what we can without rampant speculation, which is what I do. But Nolan Rucci, good run blocker, maybe not the level of power and strength that a guy like Anthony Donkoh has, which is not surprising, seeing as Anthony Donkoh's 330 pounds and Nolan Rucci is 6'8", 315 or something like that. So just the mass over frame isn't the same. So having that explosive element in the run game, or having that cheat code in the run game against a team that plays 2 high safeties, that gives you numbers in the box, that has to be something Penn State takes advantage of in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with Nolan Rucci, he is. It's fair to say that he is a bit further along as a run blocker than a pass protector. And so, if Penn State can get itself in a situation where it's running more, at least in my mind, if he's the one that has to play, that will be the key for him and for Penn State, regardless of whether they have Anthony Donkoh or not. It kind of feeds into the next super chat question we have. Thank you, Josh, for donating to the channel and being here with us on Wednesday morning. Question: is our biggest advantage over USC in the trenches on both sides? Where do you think USC's offensive and defensive line rank among Penn State's other 5 opponents this year? Initial thought.
So I'm still, this is the problem, is like I said, I planned on doing a lot of film study yesterday and I didn't get to it. So on the offensive side, the pass protection is bad. It's affecting the way that Lincoln Riley calls offense. So that has to be an obvious bottom half of the Big Ten. Defensively, they're not all terrible, but they do have some glaring weaknesses. You can run in the middle on these guys. And so I would also say probably bottom half of the Big Ten. And that has been kind of the conversation, right? This is the welcome to Big Ten season for USC, which is funny because Lincoln Riley had good offensive linemen at Oklahoma. He just hasn't been able to get them up to speed at USC. And that has been a major detriment to his offensive scheme and what he wants to do in the couple years he's been there. So it is, yes, it is the number one advantage that Penn State has. This is also one of the best offensive lines from a run blocking perspective and from an impact run blocking perspective that Penn State has had. They're better than they were last year in that particular area because of the way the offensive system gives them an advantage to dominate in areas where before they were having to, their level of domination last year was getting to every block and securing it. This year, not only are they getting and securing the block, they're able to move guys off the ball. And so, yeah, I think that is the number one advantage on both sides of the ball for Penn State for sure.
Pro Football Focus season-long grades. Get ready for this, T. Frank. In pass blocking, USC is a 45 grade overall so far this year. That ranks 128 out of 134. Yep. And the run blocking is number 101 out of 134. So, yeah, Josh, I don't think there's any question that Penn State has the edge in the trenches, and it's by far the biggest advantage Penn State has over USC in this game.
I think they can still run the ball in terms of being able to find space because of the way the offense creates space, and having a running back that is able to violently attack it. But then the question becomes, is Penn State's defensive line overwhelming? Going back to what we talked about last week, this is going to get into bleeding a little bit of our Sunday film study of talking about the Manny Diaz, Tom Allen kind of split and how they've called defenses. But last week specifically, they were not run blitzing as much. They were not as aggressive because, in my opinion, they were trying to prepare for this game against USC, trying to control the line with 4 players and have more of a read and react instead of an attack. Now, in the second half, they just decided, okay, let's win the football game. And in the third quarter, it was over. Like they just, they shut down the UCLA offense. So if they have to go into that bag early in the game, maybe you give USC a couple more opportunities in terms of their ability to throw the ball short and catch and run. But I think that when you talk about this particular run defense perspective, that's the thing is like they could shut down USC completely if they can control the line with just four players, especially in the middle with Zane Durant getting in the backfield.
Yeah. He's right next on the list of X factors for me. I picked Tony Rojas, but it's really the linebackers. So if you don't know much about USC, a name you are going to hear frequently on Saturday is running back Woody Marks' name. So he has caught a pass in 50 consecutive games now. He'll be trying to go for 51. It's the longest active streak in college football, as you can probably imagine, for a running back anyway. No, I believe that's for any player. Sorry, any player. But either way, very impressive. He also has 181 receiving yards after contact. So that is number 8 in the country for running backs. And Penn State has had a tackling problem at times at linebacker. So, and you know that in more cases than not, your linebackers are probably going to be dealing with him as someone when he comes out, when he comes out of the backfield, and he will come out of the backfield a lot. So to me, I think that when you look at what those guys can do and impact this game, it's going to be in a lot of different ways, especially if USC does go to the quick passing attack we expect it to. But one way is going to be making sure Marks is contained because, again, they use him a ton out of the backfield, and he can make you pay for it if you let him alone and if you don't tackle him. So to me, it's on those guys to make sure he does not have a game-changing impact on Saturday in the Coliseum.
And Tony Rojas has been excellent covering running backs and sometimes even receivers out of the backfield. You know, one of the things I was most excited about with him is his coverage ability. And in the chat, we're talking about moving Abdul Carter back to linebacker this game. The biggest difference, and especially in this game, is like you need coverage players. And I don't understand. He's not good in coverage. He's a D end. And like not only is he a D end in spirit, he's 260 pounds. He can move. And I don't want to go too far and say like he's terrible, but his strengths are run defense and attacking the line of scrimmage, which he can do very well at defensive end. Tony Rojas has allowed a passer rating of 27.4. He has not allowed a touchdown. He has an interception, a pass breakup, and he's been targeted 13 times in coverage so far. So he's gotten a lot of work. Tony Rojas, his tackling has had to get better. His run defense has been a little bit weak. But by God, he is an advantage matchup in this particular thing you're talking about here against Woody Marks. I would feel very comfortable if I'm Penn State with having him in that situation.
A lot of talk about the Penn State defense and USC offense so far. I want to move over to the Penn State offense against the USC defense, T. Frank, before we wrap up the show with another deep dive on Tom Allen. Kevin Rice has a super chat for us. Thank you, Kevin, for donating to the channel. Question. This is a big game for the team and for James Franklin. Do you think we will see some screens and some misdirection plays that were set up on tape from the previous week? Enjoy your show. Yep, and we enjoy having you here.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. And T. Frank, I think that is It is one of the things that fascinates me most about Andy Kotelnicki every week is that you don't know what showed up last week or 2 weeks ago. It's going to show up in a different way in the current week. And that's one of the more fun things. Again, I know that I would be willing to bet we're going to get some comments here shortly about maybe relying on the Warren Wildcat package too much or the Bo Prabula package too much. And I get it, but he is constantly setting up either fakes or things that he is going to actually go to down the road. And you don't know when it's coming, but when you see it, you can remember where it came from first.
Yeah, and there's a lot of elements and layers in this particular offense for that reason. Just to give you more than one option on a play. So it is interesting. They have not run screens like almost at all in this offense. And I think to me, part of it is they are so effective at running the football, and a screen, in my mind, especially like a wide receiver screen or a wide screen, is in a lot of ways just a run play. So would you rather run the ball with your offensive line that is dominant, or would you throw a screen? Spread teams run screens because they don't have a good line is typically, in my mind, the shortcut answer to these things. So if you think back to 2021 and they just spammed the screen game because it was better to have Brenton Strange out there blocking for you than it was to have your offensive line blocking in the middle. Like they couldn't run the ball, so let's get some run yardage with Jahan Dotson. Right. In this situation, they're good at running the football, and they have a quarterback that can push the ball down the field. And with the balance of stretching the field laterally and vertically, they need that vertical element from the passing game, which is why he's averaging such a deep depth of target, why they've been so aggressive. But this is a great question because USC run a lot of preventative coverages. They are a two high structure, a quarter half team, cover 6 team. They run a lot of cover 2. Now, last week against UCLA, Drew Aller burned them for running cover 2. But generally, those teams force you to throw underneath. So it could be a game where they do rely more on that catch and run, some of those underneath throw and catch. That is something I think is entirely possible in this game for sure.
All right, Kevin, thank you for helping us drive the show. T. Frank, when you look at, we talked about the trenches, so I don't want to get too, I don't want to go too far down that path, but I do wonder about special teams in this game. I really do. Riley Thompson has had, I would say, an up and down second year for Penn State. He has been at times good, and he has been at times shaky. Last week, I believe, was shaky. Man, I'm not gonna mess up his last name, but Eddie Zablicki, I think it is, the punter for USC, 50.1 yards per punt, third in the country, and the Trojans are also third in the country in net punting with 46.25 yards. So USC could even if Penn State's defense really comes to play, USC may not have as much of a problem as you think changing field position. Riley Thompson will have to be his equal on Saturday. And then there's no question that when you look at the kicking game, it's very easy for me to wonder if Ryan Barker is ready to go make a pressure field goal at USC. Not that he can't do it. We just haven't seen him do it. Michael Lance is the kicker for USC. He's 7-9 this year. He also handles kickoffs. And he is not a touchback guy. He is not a touchback guy like Gabe Nwusu, who's also had some questionable moments this year. So Penn State could try and get something in the return game going. We'll see what they do at punt returner this week after using Jake Spencer and mostly Zion Tracy last week. And then again with Branch, the star USC returner who was an All-American last year as a freshman for his work in the return game. Mm-hmm. It's not been as impactful so far this season, but don't let that make you think for a second that he can't pop one off with a moment's notice if Penn State is not lined up right and then filling its gaps right on both kick returns and punt returns.
I guess the thing I would be concerned with is equally you punt him the football and something bad happens, but then if you try and adjust how you punt the ball so that you punt away from him or that you try to punt to the sideline, and then you get a bad result because you're doing something new. That is something I've seen teams do is over-adjust, right? They overcorrect to the thing, and then they create new problems because they're out of their normal routine or out of the normal thing they're used to doing. Now, on the whole, I break down 120-ish plays a game, offense and defense. So the 10 special teams plays a game, I pretend they don't exist. So beyond that, that's all I got for special teams analysis. Punting is important. Kick return and kicker are all important. but they also make up like 10% of the game. So I have to divide my resources evenly.
No question about it. I do think that there's a possibility USC has an edge on special teams. I do not think they have one. I do not think USC has one on offense or defense over Penn State. I would say that there is a chance that special teams is one area that, at least pregame, USC has an edge. We'll obviously have to wait and see how it plays out once the teams get on the field. One question I wanted to run by here just for fun from Steven. How many fans show up for USC at the Coliseum? I bet it's relatively low. Honestly, so we're going to be chatting a bit with the USC, our US3 counterpart that covers USC, if easy for me to say, throughout the rest of this week. I'm curious to get that answer. That was actually one question I had for them is, where's the fan base at right now? I mean,
yeah.
USC,
how apathetic are they?
Right?
Yeah.
Pretty crushing loss to Minnesota. They're one loss away from maybe not being completely eliminated from the college football playoff, but in all likelihood being eliminated from the college football playoff with a third loss, especially when you consider the one is to Minnesota and the other one's to Michigan, who just lost to Washington. The resume is not exactly looking great for USC. So do the fans come out in full support for the Trojans to try and obviously score an upset victory and get things back on track, or do they not? I'm sure Penn State will have plenty of fans there. So interesting question, Steven. I don't know that answer, but do check in at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com later this week, or later today even, and we'll see what we can find out from our counterparts on the other side of the country. Final thoughts, I guess, here, T. Frank. We're going to get into the Sunday film study then, but just final thoughts. I know you guys will get into it a bit more tomorrow. Don't forget the BWI Live Recruiting Show, which also will feature plenty of Penn State USC chatter, comes to you tomorrow with T. Frank, Ryan Snyder, and Sean Fitz right here on the BWI YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast. Final thoughts. I know you still got a lot more film study and all that work to do, but the question to me is just, at this stage, do you feel like it is justified that Penn State is right around a 5.5-point favorite and, could end up being predicted to win this game by a touchdown by the odds makers?
Yes. Yeah. And so the question you asked before the show is, which team do you trust more? I trust Penn State more because the way that they may have to win this game is to put together methodical drives.
Right.
I don't want to say they want to take the air out of the football, because I do think they're going to try and take shots when they're available and try to be aggressive in the passing game. But if not, they can go on 16-play drives. They have a smart quarterback who gets them in the right looks. They have a really good running game with veterans that are reaching the peak of their abilities as running backs. The offensive line, for the most part, has been very good. And USC does not have an interior guy that can challenge some of the weaknesses, relative, by the way. And I mean Nick Dawkins here being a good football player that just isn't a 350-pound mauler like Venga Ioane, or Sal Wormley, who's no small dude on his own, being like 340 or whatever he is, 335. So they have the quickness and the athleticism plus the size and strength to get the job done. And they have a quarterback that is explosive with the ball in his hands. And he takes care of the football. And the only thing left for him is to just have that a little bit of athletic hubris of like, I'm going to fit the ball in there. Tyler Warren's going to catch this. And we've seen that wax and wane. West Virginia, it was excellent. We've seen it come out against UCLA on the road. Just drop the hammer. And I don't have any question that Penn State's the team you trust more. Their defense is better, decidedly better. So yes, there are threats. There are paths to victory for USC. But there are more paths to victory for Penn State. And I think that is a very clear fact. And if you're in the chat saying James Franklin has to win this game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can lose any game against a good team with a good quarterback. Miller Moss could get hot. But Penn State has more advantages in this game for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Penn State goes into this game, I think you just hit the nail right on the head, with more avenues to win. That does not mean none of those exist for USC. So time will tell. I know a lot of Penn State fans out there are probably, I know some are looking at it like, well, Penn State has never, in James Franklin era, has always had struggles on the road, especially when it's against better teams, not, pushovers in USC. I don't think it's a pushover, but it could end up being one. We'll see. So I get all of that, but I think if you just look at this 2024 Penn State team and you just look at this 2024 USC team, it is fair to expect Penn State to win this game, and it's fair to expect it to do so. I don't know if it doesn't have to be a blowout. It can be close. But two questions remain for Penn State. Do they have a killer instinct? Can they, put a team away. Now, you can say they did that with other opponents on their schedule. And to be fair, Illinois, Bowling Green, I guess, Bowling Green, maybe not a great example, but Illinois, UCLA, even though Penn State never truly really kicked away, neither one of those teams were threatening to win really at any point in time in the second half, despite what the scores was in those games. So time will tell. But to me, I think that's what I'm watching for. I was going to pick USC to win this game last week. Just full disclosure, I was. Mm-hmm. Then I got to watch. That was a great part of having Penn State at noon on Saturday. Was that I got to watch Minnesota USC at 7:30 on Saturday night. Got a better feel for them. I think D'Anton Lynn is doing some nice things as a defensive coordinator at USC. We talked about how Miller Moss and how Branch and these guys can hurt you. I just see a few more paths to victory for Penn State than I do USC. So we'll have predictions up over at Blue White Illustrated on Thursday.
And they've adapted to. I remember watching the LSU game to start and looking at some of their defensive decisions in the secondary, going, "What are you doing? Why would you do that? Why would you put your safety in a position where he's having to cover like an elite wide receiver?" And they have done a lot of stuff since then, I think, to kind of reshape the defense and play to the strengths of their defense. But again, like you said, I don't think, and it's in the chat too as well, their defense isn't as good, especially in the secondary. So you do have some of those weaknesses. And Greg, do you trust Penn State? Like, do you trust this particular team? Have they done enough for you to give you confidence that in a toss-up game or a game where there are weaknesses that another team can exploit, that you think they can overcome that and win?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Do I trust Penn State? I trust most of the elements of Penn State that are going to go on the road Saturday to USC. The question, I said it a moment ago, but Penn State has fairly or not developed a reputation under James Franklin that when it goes on the road for these bigger games, if you will, things don't always go as planned. Do I feel like, though, that this team, despite only how they handled the West Virginia experience between the crowd and the weather delay, to me, said a lot about where this team is in 2024, what kind of demeanor and leadership it has from a player level and from a coach level. So if not for that experience, I probably would not maybe have the same trust level in Penn State being okay to go on the road and win this game. But after I sat there and watched that, I was impressed with how Penn State, unlike when it dealt with the weather delay at Michigan State, was really able to come out and dominate, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, yes, I trust Penn State. Do I see some areas that could sneak up, or maybe not even sneak up, but just generally bite them? Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. But do I give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of trust going into this game after the first 5 weeks of the season? Yeah. Did I see everything I thought we were going to see, or that I felt like we needed to see from Penn State over the first 5 weeks? No. But I think we saw enough to make it fair to trust what's going on the road, that they can get this done. Another super chat from Larry. Thank you so much. He just points out Drew Aller under pressure. PFF is third in passing and second in yards per attempt, 11.4. First in turnover-worthy plays, which is a good sign. Yes. It sounds bad. It's actually good.
Yeah,
so
he's at a very low turnover-worthy play rate. Yeah,
right. Which is obviously what you want out of your quarterback. Same thing as last year, obviously, where his touchdown interception ratio was the talk of the world, really, in terms of how good it was versus what it was doing for Penn State in the biggest games. But he's been a little bit better in terms of doing things beyond just protecting the football this year.
Yeah, it's backed up now by the aggressiveness of the passing game, and part of it is the opportunities and the quality opportunities. But then it is also so I was talking to Nate. And I was watching and thinking about a lot of these things, and I was trying to go over in my mind what has been the difference in a lot of different places. And I looked at the grading chart, or the passing chart from Drew Aller last week against UCLA. He had 0 throws outside to the right. Like I want to say probably 70% of his passes were over the middle of the defense, because that's what UCLA was giving him last season. I think it was 10% of his total throws heading into week 12. He had no throws over the middle. And this year, he's eviscerating teams over the middle. So, that's the development we're talking about, of the ability to challenge coverages that are designed to take away passing and deep passing. But I want to build on Larry's point, because I swear he's like my Twitter, YouTube avatar. Like, he's a burner account that we think similarly. This is a great opportunity to see a really good game from two quarterbacks because Miller Moss has been good too. So here are some of the metrics that he has under pressure in terms of his performance. He's completing 53% of his passes. He has an average depth of target of 9.8. And he, for those that don't hate PFF grades, 73.4. That's pretty good from a passing perspective. Does have 2 interceptions, not as good as Aller, but almost 400 yards under pressure. He's under pressure a lot, and he has been keeping this offense and its head above water. So I think this is a good opportunity to see two teams play well. And just remember that if the Penn State defense gives up plays, the other team's allowed to be good too. Miller Moss is a high 4-star quarterback too. This is a matchup where if you win, it is good that you won. And style points here that is not the point here. And that's also, I think, that leads into our Sunday film study about like style points and all those things in college football this time of year anyway.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, let's get into the Sunday film study, T. Frank. We have a button for me to press. I won't be able to find it. There we go. Sunday film study time as we come down the home stretch of Wednesday, October 9 edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. Tom Allen's defense, obviously widely praised last week, T. Frank, for its play in the second half. And Penn State, of course, is the only team now in college football that has yet to surrender a point in the third quarter. It's also one of the best teams statistically in terms of scoring defense in the second half.
Yeah.
So what did you learn taking a closer look at what Penn State did in the first and the second half on defense against UCLA that can tell us something about what fans might get to see this Saturday at USC?
So it's more about the overall Tom Allen experience to me and how there is this element of, I don't know, Greg, do you get a lot of questions about what's wrong with the Penn State defense this year? Do you get
more than
it feels like everyone's dissatisfied with a defense that's playing well.
Yeah, no, I definitely have gotten a lot more questions about why isn't the defense as good as last year? What are they doing differently? Tom Allen this, Manny Diaz that, so on and so forth. It's interesting. If you look at the statistics or if you watch the film, I think sometimes, it becomes a little confusing why that question keeps coming up so much. But it is. There's no doubt about that. It is coming up plenty. And I think part of the reason why, T. Frank, is that Penn State fans get the images of the first half mistakes burned into their memory, or that crazy broken play against UCLA where the guy ran up the middle and ran for whatever it was, 50 yards or something.
Yeah.
And those one bad plays can really hurt you, especially against the best team. But at the same time, I think, Steven kind of hit the nail right on the head. Like, you're not going to be statistically what Penn State was last year every single year.
Yeah.
And I think Rob makes a great point, too. Final stat sheet, in a lot of ways, in a lot of categories, is similar to Penn State's defense from a year ago, but it doesn't feel as flashy. You're right. It does not look as flashy, but the results are still coming. That's really all that matters.
I wonder, and this is the thing I'm going to have to go look at, is the number of 3-and-outs, I think, is really the difference here in how fans are feeling about Penn State's defense, where it felt so dominant. You had a game against Iowa where they allowed 43 total yards in the game. Like, there was one drive, the first drive of the game, and then there were no bullets left in the chamber for Iowa because they used every play action deception they had that has ever been created in order to get any yards. So this is kind of my explaining the Tom Allen defense versus a Manny Diaz defense. Firstly, last week, I want to state this again. The reason they came out and played zone and they were not as aggressive in that game, my personal opinion is they were trying to get enough reps so that they can do that this week against USC, or at least show that and then give them something different, or play so they're not so fully committed to one style of play, because that's what they've been this year. Half of fans last week were like the zone blitzing, the dink and dunk, bend but don't break. And they are anything but a bend but don't break defense, Greg. They play cover one, meaning man coverage, nearly 50% of the time. 43.5% of the time they're playing cover one, meaning man coverage either with 4-man pressures and a spy or with a 5-man pressure. That is way more than what Manny Diaz did in 2023. And James Franklin told you what they were going to be preseason. He said, I want us to be a man coverage team. I think taking away those easy access throws is just better. I've seen the benefit of it. I want to do that more. Manny Diaz did it a different way. So they're getting to the same result differently. And there are a couple of different things that go into it, but the number one thing to me is the pressure. It's not just about on passing plays, but on run plays. You don't see as much run blitzing. You don't see as much defensive line stunting, meaning a defensive tackle going into a different gap than he started in. There's more conventionality in this defense overall. And that's really what it is. It's just this is more of a conventional defense that is very good with very good players that does fewer things and trying to do those better. But the pressure is the real difference. Nobody blitzes as much as Manny Diaz on any front, anywhere, maybe ever. I think it's him and Brian Flores in the NFL, and that's the list. In terms of the diversity of blitzes too, not just overwhelming pressure. So last season, Penn State actually played as much zone as they did man. They played cover 1, cover 3, and cover 2. What they were trying to do is create pressure and the illusion of pressure. And when you do that, you have two choices. Play only man coverage, which is somewhat predictable and somewhat you can get open against, or play zones and predict where the routes are going to go and take those away. So I do think if you're saying like, what's better? Manny Diaz's defense had a little more of the suffocating, there is no way out of this. And Tom Allen's defense has had a little bit of that, but he's also playing without the plan they came into the season expecting to have, meaning Jalen Reed is fixing a lot of these problems playing that lion position.
Right.
So to me, that's the biggest difference is they are playing man coverage. They are not a dink and dunk. They are not a bend but don't break team, but they are not doing things the Manny Diaz way, where you are doing pressure to force the defense to, or force the offense to not do certain things. And then the ball can only go to a number of players at a number of positions. And so when you play something more conventional, you get some more conventional results. Manny Diaz's defense was good. It is still good at Duke, but even that has some weaknesses in it, right? Because any defense, when you throw at a certain position, becomes man coverage. So Ohio State, throw the ball down the field. Just throw the ball up to Marvin Harrison Jr. against the blitz. It's his own coverage, but all of a sudden, Kalen King is down the field one-on-one with Marvin Harrison Jr., who is like a 5-inch differential. Penn State's not putting themselves in as many positions for that and those kind of plays this year. And I think the results, as people have said in the chat, they are similar, but feel and look different.
Yes, there's no question about that. And I think really as we come down to really
long.
What is that's okay. No, I completely agree. But I do think that's really the biggest difference is that Penn State fans got really used to Manny Diaz's blitzing aggressive style and blitzing from all over and blitzing all the time. And Tom Allen is not like that. And that is the biggest difference. And I just think the visual, you kind of hit the nail on the head, but the visual way the pass rush appears to happen, not just appears, but it happens, looks different. And I think that, as much as maybe anything, T. Frank, is why some people are confused, or not confused, but feel like the defense is not playing at a high level, when in reality, in a lot of ways, it is.
Yeah, and they're doing, I would say they're doing harder things this year, too, where man coverage is the hardest thing you can do. And somebody asked in the mailbag, like, why aren't they getting as many interceptions or as many turnovers, I should say. So in man coverage, your back is to the football. You have less opportunity to get those interceptions. Now, one of the things when Kalen King was good, I'm sorry, that was the wrong way to phrase that. When Kalen King was playing well in 2022, he was playing man coverage in a way where he was reading the ball and the player at the same time. He was doing some really hard things and intercepting the ball at a high rate. And that's why everyone thought he was a first-round draft pick, because he was doing NFL-level stuff. Then they played more zone, and he did not play as well in those situations. So I think that there is a facet of this is really hard, and they didn't ask players to do that as much last year. And that is a part of the conversation. And it also creates an environment where the pass rushers get easier one-on-one opportunities where you're getting chipped less as defensive ends. So it's more about controlling with the defensive line and playing different coverages behind that, but primarily man.
Yes. And so Penn State will, of course, go to USC this weekend. We got to get out of here shortly because we have a wrestling show to tape and then some traveling to do. But just your final thoughts, T. Frank, as we wrap up. Thank you to everyone who donated to the channel, who joined us here today on BWI Live on Wednesday, October 9th. Like I said earlier, the recruiting show, BWI Live recruiting show, will be back with T. Frank, Ryan Snyder, and Sean Fitz on Thursday, October 10. We will have complete coverage from Penn State's final availability in State College on Wednesday night before the team ships off to USC. And T. Frank, let's get out of here. Final thoughts.
Well, it's hard to have final thoughts after I feel like I emptied the clip here at the end. I'm going to try and go into the details and some of the things we talked about in terms of the matchup and how teams have defended USC, the data about how I think this can work out for Penn State in that vein. So I'm going to try and get to that. But of course, like you said, we've got a wrestling show to do. We got practice tonight. We've got observations from practice. Subscribe. Promo code WEARE for 50% off. Join right now, and you're going to get just a main line of premium content tonight, starting around 5 o'clock once we are let into practice, and then concluding after James Franklin's press conference, and then all of the stuff that comes after that. So we're going to have a lot of great stuff, including all of those things. We'll have our predictions, previews, all that coming up this week.
All right. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. You have been listening to another edition of BWI Live. We'll be back on Thursday. Until then, have a great rest of the week, everyone. We will talk to you again live from USC. But first, the recruiting show tomorrow. Have a good day.